Okay, so now that we've done a little bit of hand walking, a little bit of stand your ground hand grazing, we're going to look at teaching a horse to stand still before we put on the cross ties. And right this moment, he's being pretty good. So our job, he's got a bit of extra energy this morning because of the bathing last night. We couldn't turn him out this morning. We needed him to stay clean for the clipping. So we can use something like mats as a visual element to sort of teach him to keep his feet on the mats, which is really just giving us a very strong visual boundary, right? Before we cross tie him, I need him to voluntarily stand still and be patient and relaxed. So there where he took a step forward, I'm just going to ask for a step back. I'm going to ask him to not look around. So if he comes too close, especially within an arm's length, I'm going to ask him to back away from my space. He rebounds right back, but I kind of have my arm's length. That's minimum personal space for me. When he looks around, I'm going to correct his head to be straight. So I'm just, if he looks to the right, I'm bumping him to the left. If he looks to the left, I'm bumping him to the right. And when he's quiet, I can give him a little pet. But if I don't have the mind focused on me, if I don't have his attention, then I'm not going to have the feet being still. If he wants to bite, I'm just using a little open hand to say there's a boundary there, right? I don't want him coming into my personal space. He also has a tendency to use his head a little bit like a weapon. So I'm just working on correcting the straightness of the head and neck to the back and making a million little corrections to keep his attention here without letting him invade my personal space, right? And then what I'm going to wait for is that I don't have to make so many corrections. I see his mental focus more on me in a positive way, a calm way, right? Not antsy, not invading my space. I'm going to ask him to step back a little. Right? I don't want his head down, sniffing around. I don't want it left. I don't want it right. And I don't want it pushing on me. So every correction I'm making is saying, don't do that. 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 So how do you know when to release? Because what we tend to do is try to control a horse like this. Try to hold them still, which never works. They just get better at sort of moving around whatever control you thought you had. The key to this is every single time I make a correction, as soon as he sort of does what I want, I have an instant release. So the aid, which is increased pressure, tells him no, and the release of the aid, back to what we could call a neutral contact, says yes. So I'm saying, and this is what horses understand, no, 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 yes. No, yes, no, yes. It's very black and white in their mind. So here where he's invading my personal space, I'm going to ask for a step backwards because he does nip. So I want to teach him, don't do that. I'm going to try to use the halter and be polite. If I have to be impolite, I'm going to say, hey, that's my personal space. Now, that is not hitting the horse with a punishment, right? If I need to teach him not to bring his head into this area, right? I can create a boundary with my tool or my hand. If he sticks his nose in there, if it's constant, then I can use this like a moving boundary. So if he wants to stick his nose into that moving boundary, that's on him, not me, right? If I'm just reaching out like I did with the lead rope and saying, there's my boundary, right? That's a better way of thinking about making corrections rather than punishment. It's a consequence for him not controlling himself, right? So if he keeps coming forward into my space, I can use the lead rope. I can use my arms, I can do something sudden, and I can just say, I wouldn't go there, right? So it's not, I can even not look at him and just take up more personal space with my tool. Then he needs to pay attention to that. It's his responsibility to control himself. It's not my responsibility to control every little move he makes or to try to control him to be still. So if he looks back, I bump the lead rope and say, don't look there. If he looks there, bump the lead rope. And you see how my energy is matching his energy. If he does something hard and fast, I'm going to make a hard and fast correction. If he does something gently, I'm not going to ignore it just because it was low energy and gentle. I'm going to make a gentle correction. So here where he wants to kind of test the waters, if I let him into the space and he bites me, that's on me. You can't complain about that. You said it was okay for him to come in exploring with his mouth, right? And that can actually feed anxiety. So a young horse can bounce between anxiety, flight mode, want to get away, which is what he's doing now, to sudden fight mode, which just means towards. So he's going to bounce between taking his mind away and then taking his mind to sort of push on me. So when he pushes, I have an arm's length boundary. When he looks away, that's the first sign of flight, is that distraction. So there's the bounce. So he went from looking away to sort of saying, can I push on you, right? So I'm showing lots of different strategies to just give him a physical boundary for my personal space bubble. Super important, right? Then I'm waiting for him to accept the deal. I can correct him a million times, but I can't make him like it. That's a time game, right? So here I go, no, don't sniff the ground. No, we're going to stay focused here. And for young horses especially, instinctually, they pay attention to lots of things because their instinct is to constantly be scanning their environment for signs of change that could mean they're unsafe, right? For every horse at whatever age, it's good to do with young ones, learning to calmly focus on the human as a singular focus is a learned skill. So this is a very, very gentle way in basic handling to just begin that process of teaching him how to be a domesticated horse, how to use the thinking part of his brain instead of the instinctual part of his brain, until he learns he can stay focused on one thing instead of many, and he doesn't need to be anxious or pushy, right, or tense. So I have to wait for the calmness. I can make all of these corrections that say, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But he has to figure out what are the boundaries and am I safe, right? Once he feels safe internally, we'll see the energy go from busy and distracted or pushy to just calm. He'll just be calm, right? There's the beginning of it. So if I have that focus and that expression for, I don't know, consecutive 2, 3 to 5 minutes, then I go, that's a horse that's going to be safer on the cross ties, is more prepared to stand still, right? And he's friendly enough. He's not really mean, aggressive, or super fearful, but these are the mild expressions of fight or flight. So nothing means nothing to a horse, and if I ignore that and I blow through it, it's going to go from this mild version to moderate, and if I go, I can kind of manage it, then it's going to go from moderate to extreme. So what the horse is yelling at us when they are sort of distracted like this, when the mind goes, flight just means away, and fight just means towards. So when the mind goes away, that's like that. That's the beginning of a flight defensive pattern. When the mind comes towards, right? Not respecting personal space or coming at me with aggression or snarkiness or a pushy expression like that. I don't need to punish him. I need to establish a space boundary. If I keep him out of biting, kicking, striking distance, then I don't care what he does. As long as it's not affecting me in my personal space, we're good. Right? Then I'm going to wait for that sign of acceptance, which means he's going to voluntarily focus on me and have a very calm demeanor, calm expression, a little close, right? So I just go, I wouldn't be sticking my nose in my personal space, right? So you see, I'm getting moments of what I want, and then it cycles out. So the mind and the calmness, the emotional mental balance, there it cycles in. Now the question is, how long does it last before it cycles out? For some horses, or when I started with him, it was maybe 10 seconds it lasted, and then it cycled back out. The longer I do this, you see each time he sort of gets the idea of the inner boundary and the outer boundary. He's telling me in those moments, he's starting to feel safe internally. He's learning how to focus on the rider. He's learning the beginning of his job, which is why this is put in the category of basic handling. He's learning his job, and when he accepts it, this is not a hard job. Stand still, right? You can do this with lame horses, old horses, baby horses. It's not a hard, physically taxing job. It's taxing to the mind, and I have to wait for the emotions to shift, right? So learning to focus is a learned skill for all horses. They bounce when they're being naughty, or what we call bad behavior. It's really either an expression of flight, away with mind, emotions, or feet, or it's too much towards, which is fight, with the mind, the emotions, and the feet. Right? So I just keep correcting as he bounces back and forth, which is perfectly normal. So when I sort of used my hand as a boundary, he thought it was a game, and he started to think about biting me. So then I added the tool, and I got bigger. And you see, it's not against him. He can give himself relief any time by not invading my space. He can give himself relief any time, no pressure on the halter or lead rope, every time he's concentrating on me and calm, right? It's not lasting very long, but I'm up to almost a minute now. He can hold the concentration, keep his feet still, and be calm, right? So there I'm saying, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. It's a million no's. When he discovers through all of the corrections that all I want him to do is focus on me, stand still, and hurry up and relax, right? And this is hard. It's challenging for him because he's a 3-year-old. But that doesn't mean he can't do it. And if we excuse it because he's a 3-year-old, then we could have a 10-year-old that has the exact same behavior. Because if we don't address it, if we don't teach it as a skill for the horse in the human environment, then they may never learn it. They may figure it out on their own over time, or they may not. So a lot of the behavioral problems that I deal with in adult horses are really things like this in basic handling that I would consider baby training, right? At his age, this is perfectly appropriate. There's what I'm looking for. And I could even time it on my watch and go, how long is it lasting? When I get a full 5 consecutive minutes like this, cross tying, no problem. Picking up feet, no problem. But this is the learning frame of mind at the halt.